Welcome to CreatiCast with your host, David Welch. In today's episode, we're going to discuss gripping tales, what makes stories page turners, and we're also going to talk about criticism that counts. In today's show, we're definitely going to go over a few stories, some poetry, and take a good look at what it takes for writers to establish themselves in the writing community and develop work that is highly sought after, highly read. So let's talk about nuance. Nuance is bringing something to the table on a pre-existing trope or idea, and then having a fresh look or a different look to an already existing platform of story, idea. Now here's an example of what I'm talking about. Maleficent is a very nuanced look at an old story. We have Grimm's Fairy Tales. We have a slew of other stories that are being released. Even Once Upon a Time. I mean, that's one of my favorite stories out there. And it's one of my favorite TV shows because it gives you such a nuanced look at old fairy tales we thought we knew and loved. So, there we are. I mean, that right there is what makes tales gripping. You know, there is a nuance, there is something new to it. One of the books that I like that was very nuanced lately is Donna Lee's Beauty and the Beast mini story, a micro story, if you will, that takes place during Belle's time at the castle with the Beast. And it's lost in a library or lost in a book, I think is what it's called. And it was a very gripping tale because it brought you inside of the experience Belle had while she was, in the Beast's care. And you get a fresh perspective on how things really were in that mysteriously magical castle. Another thing that makes books gripping is dialogue. Dialogue is kind of old hat, but spicing up the dialogue a little bit or adding appropriate colloquialisms can add flair. I mean, we've seen Mark Twain do it. We've seen a couple of genre writers perform this pretty well. There's a lot of writers out there that'll be like, no, it's got to be legible. You got to stick to these old mindset of, hey, don't bring in colloquialism or jargon because not everybody's going to get it. But if everyone's not your audience, then that's okay. If you write a story about the South and you're from the South and you're writing about the South and you use jargon that people from the South are going to readily recognize, then that is okay because you're writing for a specific audience. You don't expect scientists in all their form and glory to articulate things to people in ways that they will readily understand. In fact, when we write academic work, we actually write to a specific community that we acknowledge and that we expect to read our material. We also expect them to have a certain understanding of the literature we discuss and at the length of discourse and understanding that we deliver. One of the greatest things about writing as an author today is that the world is literally your oyster. I mean, there is so much room for good writing to be readily available because people are reading at mock chicken. People read at copious amounts. There are people that literally will consume 4 or 5 books a week or more. There are people that read 2 books a day. They're just at that stage in life where they're just reading that much material, and that's what they do. It's part of their pastime, part of their fun curriculum, part of their mindset. You know, I mean, it's just incredible that we have circumstances that allow us to reach more people quicker. Sorry, my computer's making sounds, guys. So I want everybody to just understand that writing gripping tales and having nuance and having jargon and creative dialogue are great. They actually add to the desire to read a book. What really makes something worthy of being read? I'll tell you guys first and foremost what it is for me. It's, can you grab my attention in the first chapter of the book that'll ensnare my interest for me to read? And they do say, never judge a book by its cover, but oftentimes, and this is true for me, I will buy a book based on what it says on the cover. Or I will stray away from a book that may be even a classic because the cover sucks so bad. Even though it may be a great novel and maybe a great work of literature. What really got me to read Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Books, was a different type of cover that I didn't see before. It was an orange book cover. It was imbued with or inlaid with a nice texture, and I don't know why, but it was the cover that really, like, hey, I'll give the Jungle Books a chance. I thought I knew the story, and then you watch films like Mowgli, and you're like, wait a minute, that's more analogous to what I read versus other versions of the story we've come in contact with. But it's great. It's great that we have these great illustrators and great graphic artists that put together these amazing covers for authors, and I love seeing the collusion of creativity. So what also makes a tale gripping is how you compose your story. If a tale has too much or an overabundance of exposition without moving the plot forward, that will tire my brain out before I even get a chance to go. I mean, reading Victorian literature was a daunting task for me in college because Dickens, Austen, and several other writers could describe a simple setting in 5 pages or more, or 10 pages, and it was daunting. It was, I don't want to, I love the visual, I love getting the insight, but sometimes we gotta let our imagination do the work. And sometimes being very concise with your language is gripping. It's very having a particular cadence. If you read anything Alexander Kent, you'll understand that guy has a very strong cadence and craft to his writing. It's very particular and rewarding, and very much satisfying to read. Now, I don't know if that's his editor, don't know if it's him, I assume it's both. If you have a great editor that makes your work pop, then keep that editor. Make them your best pal, because they're the ones that are really pushing forward your style, your craft. Sometimes what's gripping as far as tales is taking something small, like a minute idea or a urban legend or something, and expounding upon that idea until it becomes an entire narrative. One thing Douglas Adams is notorious for is he's very notorious for taking a kind of a general concept or a general saying and a general understanding of something, and looking so deep into it that it becomes part of his hilarity, part of his mantra of composition and the way he composes things. One of the greatest aspects of a gripping tale is the cliffhanger. It's a tried and tested, complex of situation to leave at the right exact moment at the end of a chapter. But sometimes we need that. Sometimes we like to end where the villain may have the upper hand on the good guy. I mean, we enjoy that. We enjoy the, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? You are almost forced to dive right into the next page. So there are some authors that really kick ass at doing this. Connie Golden being one. I read the Sebastian Dark novels and their young adult literature when I was in college, and those had really good chapter endings, and each chapter felt like its own mini story, which was why they were so valuable for me to read. Sometimes gripping tales are very character driven. If you have one character that is so unique, so nuanced, and in fact, here's a good example of this. This is an example in film, but we love the character of Riddick in Pitch Black and Chronicles of Riddick and the newer films, or the one Riddick, you know. So we enjoy the character because he is so unique. Vin Diesel does an excellent job of making that character his own, and to the point where we couldn't imagine anyone else playing that character. In fact, we get this way about literature too, because we get miffed if who we envision to play a certain character ends up on screen. We get pissed off and protest. We're like, no, I didn't see that at all. I would pick this actor. This is who I envision. This is how it was described in the book. And you'll see people, they'll light up Twitter. If it's something not very specific, or if someone does an interpretation that isn't really favored amongst the literature and reading community, you'll see it. And the same goes for gamers. Gamers are very particular, very nuanced, very understanding of how their ideal for their non-player characters and their character looks. So they will have a stake in the game mentally to say, hey, this is how my character should look. Fuck off with any other interpretation. They get that mentality. Now, let's talk about criticism that counts. People in general are full of criticism, full of their own thoughts and decisions and choices. What we don't value anymore, and what seems to be not valued or appreciated, is great constructive criticism. People don't want their baby to be messed with. They don't want to be viewed as an incompetent or sloppy writer or not a creative person. They want to be viewed in that light. But it's sometimes we have to take in information where and when it arrives, and we have to dissect that information before we respond, because I know sure as shit I get super defensive if somebody says something about one of my stories that isn't in favor. I'll be like, well, why? Because I come back with an immediate question. Well, why? You know, and if they don't have an immediate answer, then I just discard them, and I can't do that. I have to sit back and assess why they may have come to that conclusion. So one of the things about a short story that I really enjoy, that I enjoyed writing, and that I is in my book Hell's Waiting Room and Other Stories, is wow, my mind is running blank. It's called My First Day of School, and I really enjoyed writing that. But when it was first published, before it was first published, the feedback I got was, hey, not everybody's going to understand, or hey, some freaking math genius must have wrote this book because it's a complex short story that involves math and critical thinking. No, not at all. It was just a prompt. It was a challenge to myself to write a story in a subject that I do not like and I'm not a very big fan of, and that's math. You'd be like, wait a minute, you're a professor, you're educated, you have your degrees, you don't like math? It's not my favorite subject. It's not. Can it help me? Do I find it absolutely valuable and beneficial? Yes. My favorite subject? No. And that's okay. But if you look at literature, it's its own formula. It's its own way of composing a formula that works for people. So, criticism that counts. If the criticism doesn't prompt you to critically think about your own work, then does it really count? That's a good question. If there is something obvious with your writing that you catch and that you know may not be well received, but you publish it anyway, you can expect that feedback. One of the criticisms that I was in defense of one of my favorite authors, Lewis Meyer, before he passed away, was that the following books for the Bloody Jack series weren't as detailed and as compelling as the first novel. I say that that's a very short-sighted way to look at the following novels. But one thing that he did that was very clever for me and very important for my understanding and development of his characters was that as time wore on, the characters got more articulate. The language in the novel got sharper. It got very specific. And it was a very wonderfully crafted narrative. In first person, mind you, for 90% of the stories, or 90% of the content of the book. So, to take on that challenge, that mantle of being nuanced, and then having a female protagonist that goes on these amazing adventures and does all these crazy things is nuanced. It's great. And it livens up the literature that we need to have for our young ladies. Criticism that counts. Here's criticism that's absolutely hitting true. There are not enough female protagonists in mainstream literature. We have an usurpation almost of female protagonists and villains in the Marvel and DC universe. But I've always felt that there was at least an average balance in the male-dominated world of literature, in comic books specifically. But when it comes to other forms of literature, you rarely see or rarely invest time in to female protagonists. I would love to see a book where the average soccer mom has an event and does something extraordinary. We almost see that with Peppermint. We see a very similar trope, which in literature we don't get. We get the Jack Ryans from the male aspect, but we don't get the female Jack Ryan. We don't get these epic heroines that we should have. Now, we also don't have a slew of kid champions either. We have a few. I mean, we do have young adult literature and children's lit, but in mainstream genre fiction, we don't have it. But it's okay. We have an awakening in manga. We have an awakening in science fiction that is making waves in the literature community, which I love. Any way we can get to surpass our preconceived notions of self, our preconceived notions of we're the shit because we write in this particular genre, or we are the bee's knees because we follow suit with what everybody else is doing. So criticism that counts may be from people you don't necessarily respect, but those are the people that are going to give you the most honest feedback. People that don't like you will hit your shit hard. They may have a little bit of an implicit bias, but consume what they're saying, mold that around a little bit, and then perfect your craft. Work on it. A lot of people that I've seen in the writing community will swear off writing, swear off trying to write a book, because you hear that's the number one excuse. Oh, well, I used to want to be a novelist, I used to want to write a book, and you hear their excuses. Oh, it will just, I wasn't well received, or, I didn't have a computer consistently, I didn't have blah, 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 blah. It's not what you don't have, it's what you don't do. If you don't take the time to go somewhere and write or perfect your craft, you're not going to. If you don't read, you're not gonna be a better writer. If you don't dig yourself into the genre you want to compose or write yourself, like for me, historical fiction or sci-fi or young adult literature, I immerse myself in it. I read copious amounts of young adult lit. To be fair and to be honest, I haven't read since my flight, really. A little bit, not a lot of it, but that is my own shortcoming. I know a lot of you in the writing community right now are really in a good mode, where you put a little bit on Twitter, you put a little bit on social media, and then you're writing. Or I see the hashtags everywhere. Am writing, am an author, writing community, blah blah blah. Or writers, writing in progress, or whatever it is. But what you don't see, and what you don't often believe is taking place, is a whole lot of nothing. A whole lot of nonsense. A lot of people will be like, oh, I gave writing a shot for a year, and da-da-da. No, you didn't. Or, hey, I wrote 5 manuscripts, and they're all rejected, and they all didn't go anywhere. Well, that is a very valuable criticism. If you wrote 5 manuscripts, and I had to do this to a buddy of mine, he's a good friend, his first novel was a self-published novel, and I couldn't get into it. I fucking tried my damnedest, could not get into it. I mean, I really put the concerted effort to put the work in, to read his work, provide feedback, and try to get into it. And I could not. I mean, it was just something about, I think, the lack of cadence, the complexity of the exposition, and the driest dialogue I've ever read in my life was like, listen, I cannot focus on your book because it sounds like it's in a different language to me that I don't understand. And there was a lot of things that unfortunately that publisher missed was, run-on sentences, grammatical errors galore, inconsistencies with the story. Nobody took the time to read the novel and give valuable criticism and feedback. Because my buddy literally waited a year or two after that novel and produced a very decent quality book and narrative. But it wasn't for lack of trying, because he got published everywhere, but it was when his manuscript came out and he self-published it was just not going anywhere for me. It wasn't going anywhere for a lot of people. We just didn't have an interest in to read what he was writing, and to be quite honest, it was dry and didn't really go anywhere. If that is your feedback, if your criticism is, hey, not really picking up what you're putting down, or I'm not really jiving on this. It could be people being obtuse, but it also could be you earning that grade, so to speak, when it comes to how well you're received. One thing I'd really like to do, and one thing that I want to acknowledge right now, is that my own criticism of my work is going to be fantastic. But I know, and the reality is when you have a third-party observer, when somebody's just watching your actions and they grade you according to those actions, you may fare a little bit worse off than you originally thought based on what's going on, right? Same thing with this point of view when it comes to writing, when it comes to criticism. It's often from the vantage point of, well, I'm an experienced reader, I'm a college-bound writer, I'm a college-bound reader, and I have all my ducks in a row academically, and the book works or it doesn't. You know, it's going to work for some people, it's not going to work for others. If you have a buddy that's absolutely not into science fiction, you get him to try and read your science fiction novel, you're not going to get that well received. But, so pay attention to the criticism and make sure the criticism all counts. Another aspect of criticism that counts is definitely stick to trusted professors, trusted teachers that have a vested interest in your ability to achieve a higher station of writing. What does that mean? If you take the time to really sit down with a professor, really sit down with a writing coach, and put in the work and do the drills they want you to do and formulate your writing style to emulate theirs, then that's something that'll benefit you, and it's criticism from your mentor or a mentor that does count. Moving forward. So let's talk about ensuring that we keep Create-A-Cast going. So Create-A-Cast is a solitary endeavor by myself. I want to keep the show going. I really enjoy what I do. I enjoy podcasting. I enjoy writing. So keep me on the air. Donate to Patreon. Find me on Facebook. Send me an email with your content, dwelch9627@gmail.com. Also, think about other mechanisms to reach me. Twitter, Facebook, social media of all kind. And provide me feedback that counts. Log into, go on Amazon if you've read my book, or if you've read a few tales, and give me a review. That's valuable feedback that I need. Alright? So, ensure that when you're composing your literature, make sure the tales are gripping. Make sure that they have elements of the story that you look for in books you read. In criticism that counts, make sure you hunt down constructive criticism. Try not to be defensive right away. And here comes my son. Well, baby. Someone start calling Daddy.
Oh no, check your ass. Let's go.
Alright, go watch Poopy. Go. Sorry about that, guys. So let's get into some of the readings that I was talking about earlier. And some of those are some of the new content that I'm working on. I'm going to give you guys a snippet of my book. If it responds real well to me. Let's see. Go into here. Now, not everything you write is going to be as good as gospel. Not everything you compose is publishable, or nor it should be. Nor should it be. But put in the work, and you will go far. I'm not sure if I read this one on air yet. Alright, let's see. Yeah, I think I did read this one. Let's go ahead and move to the second story. Well, let me go ahead and read the chapter I'm currently working on. I want you guys to give me some critical feedback here. So I'm on chapter 6 of my book. Not completed. I'm on page number 2 in chapter 6. And I want you to kind of give me your thoughts on it. I'm going to just jump right in. I mean, you're not going to know what's going on really, but I just want you to hear what you hear, feel what you feel, and then if you can, send me an email to dwelch9627@gmail.com. Provide me some feedback. Or, that's also a way to get your submissions into me if you want your work read live on air. The more submissions I get from you, the longer my show can be. My show can be all the way up to 3 hours. I want it to be 3 hours. Please send me your content. Again, 10 pages, font, Times New Roman, 12-point font, double-spaced if it's a short story. If it's a poem, put it in your style. If you want it read in your voice, you can contact me and be on the show with me, or you can record yourself reading the content. And I think a little bit of what I'm going to do on this show too is talk about what some of the good YouTubes that are out there in regards to some good poetry readings that I've run across. So I'll go over that in just a minute. But let me get into it. Chapter 6. And this is a little quote that I used before going into the chapter. We must embrace pain and burn it as fuel for our journey. Kenji Miyazawa. Neon color, strange sounding music, a flurry of whirring objects flying above head, a party. She must be at some sort of ceremony or evening out because everyone looks like this is a school dance. Hey, where are you at tonight? Gillimandus asked, passing a drink to Eliane. Oh, another world. His looks seemed genuinely curious, but he also seemed to be drawn to the stage area. On Dan's wrist seems to be a watch, but a little bigger than a watch. Suddenly, the interface of the watch shows words in a language Dan could finally understand. Hello, we need to communicate. I am Eliane, and tonight you are at the placement ceremony, where we get assigned our life tasks. Dan, I am sorry about your room. It was so illogical. Please leave me a message here. Eliane. Crazy. I should try leaving her a message there. What does she do while I'm not there? I have to let her know about the sheriff. Dan adjusts the watch instinctively, punching in the message akin to, okay, I'll let you know how it goes. Lights dimmed as a throng of people move toward their assigned seating, almost grade school-like. People sit cross-legged and in families or tribes. Dan notices that everyone has variations of blue pigmented skin, large eyes and multi-hued hair, and large irises. In the center of each circle were the same glowing orbs found in Eliane's home. Everyone, the ceremony has begun. Please give welcome to your candidates. At this, everyone sort of just nodded. Dan started to clap, but was regarded with several looks of disdain and derision. Blushingly, Dan watched and tried to keep Eliane in good graces. Her father, mother, and what appeared to be other relatives sat in her circle. Inwardly, Dan says, I wish she would have left me some instructions for this. And how is she falling asleep with all this going on? More questions popped into Dan's head, but he couldn't fathom any answer that made sense to him. So that's so far what I have for chapter 6. Mind you, this story is about My character Dan, who is a normal human boy on Earth, at night when he falls asleep, he wakes up in this female alien's body on her planet, multiple light years away, and vice versa. She wakes up in his body. So more on that. This is the young adult novel that I'm currently working on, and those are a few of the characters, and that's kind of a snapshot of what's going on. Now, obviously, give me some feedback. I mean, I want to know what everybody thinks. Obviously, too, you guys need to see how it's composed on the page, and I would love to do that for you. As soon as I get it all knocked out, we're going to make it happen. Now, this is something I wrote for my Navy buddies, and I'm really excited about this poem, and I want it to go far. It's called Comrades. Tonight, like all nights, I sit staring at the Milky Way in her glory, thinking back to calm seas on a gentle breeze, with palm trees swaying back and forth lazily as we skirt the northern shore and tack along the shoals, zigzagging. One moment, please. I am being shouted at. Hold on.